We start today at Neimeke Tanoi. The first word on the line is Ogur. Ogur. So the last point that we learned over here, which the Gemara will continue on, is the question about vegetables. That the bracha on vegetables, of course, is Bayre Pri Adama, but the question is what happens if you cook the vegetables? Does it still remain the same bracha, or the fact that you cooked it and it doesn't have the same taste and the same texture, maybe now it's inferior and the bracha is shahakal? So the Gemara now says, Neimeke Tanoi. Perhaps we should say that this subject is an argument of Tanoim. Tahanu Trei Talmidi, there were these two students, Tava Yasvu Kamei de Bar Kapara, that was sitting in front of Bar Kapara. Heviu Lefonov, they brought in front of Bar Kapara kruv, cabbage, cooked cabbage, durmaskin. There's a machlekes what durmaskin is. From Rashi it seems like it's prunes, which is a kind of fruit really. But Taisus disagrees. Taisus says it can't be a fruit because then it's ha'etz, and here we're talking about vegetables. He says, what is this? Spinach, right? Yeah, okay. Ufargiyos, and then some kind of meat from a bird. Those were the three foods that were in front of them. Nasam bar kapara reshus lechel mem levarich. So the bar kapara said one of the students can make a bracha and he'll be mitzi the others. What happened? Kafatz ubirech. So this one student jumped up and he made a bracha. What did he make a bracha on first? Ala pargiyos, on this meat that was there, which is of course a shahakal. That's what one student did. Lig leg olav chaverai. So there was a friend of his that mocked him. Why did you make the bracha on the meat? You should have made the bracha on the vegetables first. Now the assumption over here is, as the Gemara will explain, that the reason you should have made the bracha on the vegetables first is because that's adama. And whenever you have two foods in front of you, shahakal and adama, because adama you're thanking Hashem for something more specific, that bracha comes first. So what happened? Koaz bar kapara. Bar kapara got angry at the conduct of his students here. So the Gemara explains exactly who was he angry at. Omar, so first bar kapara said, Lo yala mevarech hanikayis. I'm not angry at the one that made the bracha on the meat first. I'm actually angry at the other student that was malaglik, that was mocking him. Why? If for your friend, the meat here is so tasty to him, that's as if he never tasted meat, and therefore that was chaviv, that's what he wants to eat, so then you make the bracha on that first, because that's what he likes, that's what's chaviv, and chaviv is a reason to make a bracha on that first. So what are you mocking him for? Right? So ata alma liglakta olav. Why are you mocking him? Then chazavama, but then Bar Kapara said, Lo ela malaglig anikayis. Not on the person that was mocking the student was I angry. El ala mavarach anikayis. I'm actually angry at this student that made the bracha on the meat first. Va'amar, and he said, Im chochme ein kan, zikna ein kan. If there's no wisdom here, in other words, referring to himself really. If you're going to say, even if you're going to say that I'm not wise, but am I not older than you? Am I not over here the teacher and older than you? Then you should have consulted with me first before you made such a decision to make the bracha on the meat before the vegetables. Why did you jump and make the bracha without asking me? Yeah, Tanam.
It says that he gave him reshus. What's he upset?
He gave him reshus to make the bracha. To make the bracha. Anyone if they could make the bracha. But which one first? You should have asked him. Tana. So now it says over here a very sharp thing. Because of their conduct in front of their Rebbe, both of them did not live out their year. Okay, that just shows you how important the honor of a teacher is, and especially Bar Kapara. When there's a kpeda from an individual like Bar Kapara, it's pretty harsh. So now the Gemara gets back to the discussion we had regarding cooking vegetables. What's the bracha, adama or shahakal? So now the Gemara says, my love, don't you think? This is the basis of their argument. The mevarich savar, the student that made the bracha of shahakal on the meat first. What is his opinion? Shlokos ufargiyos, both the meat and the vegetables, the cooked vegetables, are shahakal niyabedvare. They're both shahakal. So now if they're both shahakal, what do you make a bracha on first? So there the halacha is hilka chaviv adif. You make the bracha on what you like to eat first. If the bracha of the vegetables was adama, so then the hadama always comes first, even if you like the shahakal. So it must be that he held that it's all shahakal. Or malaglik savar, the one that was mocking him held, shlok is bayre pri adama. Even after it's cooked, it remains a bayre pri adama. Fargiyos is shahakal niya bidvari, and the meat is a shahakal. So therefore you should have made the bracha on the vegetables first. Hilkach peirod, if the vegetables come first. So this is l'chayre what they were arguing about. So the Gemara answers, no, loy. We could say the pshat here in this argument was different. The kula alma, everybody agrees, shlokes ufargeyois shahakal niya bedvare. That both of them, the bracha is a shahakal. But vahacha b'haisvar kamiflagi. They're arguing about something else. Mar savar chavevadif. The one that made the bracha on the meat first is because he holds that what's the person likes comes first. Mar savar kruv adif, and the one that was mocking him holds that the cabbage comes first. Why? The zayin. Cabbage is a kind of food that's very filling. It's a kind of food that gives a person mezainis. It fills a person more than other foods, and therefore it's more chashiv, and what's more chashiv, you should make a bracha on first before something that's more chaviv. That's what the argument is about. So the content of the argument is about the seder of brachas, even if it's all a shahakel, nothing to do with the question that we had regarding hadamah. They're not arguing about whether it's hadam or shahakel.
When would hadamah be first?
Hadam is a bracha that thanks Hashem. You're asking Bechlal why Hadam is before Shahakel? Yeah. So I said it before, because Hadam is thanking Hashem for something more specific. Shahakel is a more general bracha. So if you have an opportunity to thank Hashem for something more specific, that comes first. Amar Rab Zayda said, Ki avinam bei Rav Huna, when we wore by Rav Huna, Amalani told us, Hani gargalidi de lifta, the turnip heads. What's the bracha that you make on them? Turnip. Parminu frima rabba. If you cut them into larger slices, bayre priyadama. Then that's the way it's eaten, and therefore the bracha is bayre priyadama. Frima zutta, if you dice it into smaller pieces, so then shahakal niya bedvarai, the bracha is shahakal, because when you dice it into smaller pieces, it loses its original taste, and therefore it's similar to when you cook it. The idea of cooking, why the bracha changes, is because it doesn't anymore have its original taste and it's not the way it's meant to be eaten. So regarding this turnip, it's the same thing when you cut it in smaller slices. So the Gemara says, V'chason l'bei Rabbi Yehuda amalam, but when we came to Rabbi Yehuda, he told us, no, that's not the case. Idi v'idi bayre priyadama. Whether you cut it in large slices or smaller slices, or dice it into smaller pieces, the bracha remains bayre priyadama. When a person cuts it into smaller pieces, the reason is it actually adds a certain, it sweetens it to some extent. It may lose its taste, it may be changed, but it does in a way improve it because it becomes a bit sweeter. So therefore, the bracha remains bayre priyadama. It doesn't become inferior to something that's added to it. Ravashi said, Ki avinam bei Rav Kahana, when we wore by Rav Kahana, Amalani told us, Tavshila de silka, when you cook beets, right, so that water that you cook the beets in it, and then you take it and you make a barsht out of it, and you add flour to it. If you don't add a lot of flour, so then it's primarily the beets, the water of the beets, so then the bracha is adama. The lifta, but the same thing regarding turnips, that the water that you cook the turnips in, and then you add more flour to it, the mafshu bakimcha. That's a kind of drink that has a lot more flour in it, tfei, more, because of there's more flour there, so the bracha for that is bayre minim zaynis. This is originally what he said. But for Hada Amar, then he retracted this and he said, no, Idi v'idi bayre priyadama. In both cases, the bracha will be a bayre priyadama. V'hai the shadi bakim chetfei, and the reason why they put in flour, and even a lot of flour, l'debuki ba'alma avdila. It's just to serve as a glue, as an adhesive, that the drink should have that texture. But it's not really part of the ingredients that the person is interested in eating, b'chlal. And this is a very important rule when it comes to adding flour to ingredients. Because when it comes to the chameshes mine dagan, so you have two opposite rules that are sort of contradictory, and it's very difficult sometimes to know which one to follow. On one hand, even if you have just a little bit of chameshes mine dagan, and it's in the minority of the ingredients, but if that's part of the ingredients for the taste of the food, and of what you're interested in eating, so then even that little makes it a mezainis. On the other hand, if that's mine dagan, if the flour is only added to the ingredients just to serve as a binder, as an adhesive, so then it's not part of the food. It's not that you're interested in eating, and then the bracha is going to remain a hadama or ha'etz, whatever it is. Right, so anyone have some good examples? Yeah, right, so you have to know in cooking. A lot of times. Correct. No, but I want to have practical examples.
The French cooking.
The what?
A lot of sauces. You put the flour to make it like more,
right,
combined. And,
okay. So today they use cornstarch or potato starch, right. But it's the same idea.
But licorice has flour.
And so the question is, what bracha is it? Why are they putting that licorice in the flour? Is it to add to the taste, or is it just for the thickness of it? It's only for the thickness of it, so the bracha shouldn't be a mezainis. It should still be a shahakal.
Everybody makes mezainis.
I'm not sure why. Okay, so it is a bit tricky, because sometimes it serves as both purposes. It both adds to the texture and the taste a little bit also, and it's also a binder, so you have to know. I mean, sometimes a kugel has a flour in it. Is it really just that the kugel should hold up and shouldn't fall apart, or is it really also adding to the taste? There's many other examples you could think about this, which is a very, very relevant point. Yeah, but it's not a cook, a culinary, a chef that knows the each ingredient and exactly what the
And once or two, it said the flour you add to meatballs.
Flour and meatballs, yes. That it's definitely a shahakal. Right, so for people add flour and meatballs, people add breadcrumbs in meatballs and all kinds of things. Rice, sometimes people add in meatballs, or
the coating on the schnitzel.
So the coating on the schnitzel is a big machlekes.
It's
a big machlekes, right? Because it's not a binder. You definitely want the taste.
Yeah.
So it's a big machlekes. Many rabbanim say that the bracha will be a mezainis.
And then you make a shackle on the schnitzel separate?
I don't know. It's a big shaila. Okay, sagt the Gemara weiter. Okay, so this remember this rule. Hide the shadi ba kimcha tvei ledvuke ba mavdila. Amar Rav Chisda said, Tafshel shel trodden. What we just spoke about, when you cook beets, that water of the beets, yofel alev, is very healthy for the heart. Toiv le'nayim, it's also very good for the eyes. And v'kolshken lebnei mayim, and it's also definitely good for the intestines.
This is borscht?
Yeah, basically. Borscht is extremely healthy, as we know, as your grandmother may have told you, and it's right here in the Gemara. But here, 1 second, this is the thing you may have missed, and that is, it's only if the food sits there on the place where you put it on the fire. This is the Gemara is giving it, making the sound. It has to boil long enough, and it makes that sound. And the beet, which is a pretty solid vegetable, it becomes almost dissolved in the water. That's when it's healthy for the heart, for the eyes, and for the intestines. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa said the following: Pshitali, it's obvious to be maya de silka kesilka. When you cook the beets in the water and then you drink that water, is going to be a hadama. Maya de lifta kilifta. When you cook the lifta, which is the turnip, and that water that you drink it, the bracha is going to be a hadam as well. Now this Gemara is a big chiddush, and Taisus points it out. Other Rishonim, the Rosh, speak about it, and that is because of what we learned before, that it says that any juices that come out of any fruit or vegetable, the bracha is a shahakal, and the bracha compared it to a zayah, that it's only like the sweat that's coming out of the fruit or vegetable, and it's not the vegetable itself, and therefore the bracha is shahakal. Here, though, it says when you cook a vegetable, and then that the juice that comes out into the water, the bracha is going to be a hadama. Interesting. So the Rosh says, because when you squeeze, that's zayah. Squeezing, you don't get the essence of the fruit, but when you cook, it's the essence of the fruit that comes out to a greater extent, and therefore when you drink that, even though it's mixed into water, but yet the essence of the fruit comes out, and there the bracha is going to be a hadama. That's the distinction, and that's the chiddush of this Gemara, which is something you have to know. I mean, l'chayda, regarding borscht, people drink borscht, what bracha do they make in it? According to what the Gemara is saying here, l'chayda, the bracha is hadama. I believe that's the halacha. When you stam drink a juice that was squeezed, the bracha is shahakal. But if it was cooked and it came out in that way, the bracha is adama.
So the problem with borscht is there's a lot of other ingredients.
There's other ingredients, okay, but the main ingredient l'chayre is the hadama. Yeah.
But even like applesauce, so much, if you don't see the apple, shahakal?
No, I don't think so. Not over here. This is mamish, the essence of the fruit itself. But Rav Papa asked the question, Maya the shifta. How about when you take shifta, which is dill, and you cook it in water? So the question is, what is the dill over here in this water? What's the purpose of doing this? It's not of course a regular fruit that you're cooking. It's very different. Dill is more like a spice. Mai. Limtuki time of do people do this because they want to sweeten, they want to give the water a certain good taste of the dill? Oi la'avuri zuama of dilah. People only use the dill. The dill has a nature to be able to remove the zuama. There's this shmutz that can gather on the top of a pot when you cook, and you put in the dill, and it sort of separates it. It takes care of that zuama on the pot. So if it adds taste, then you're drinking this water that the dill was cooked in for the taste of the dill, so then you would have to make a bracha adama. If it's just to take away the zuama, so then the bracha would be shahakal. That's the question here.
Any of these like dill or cilantro or parsley or all these things, they're all hadama?
So that's what if you eat them separately?
You eat it, yeah.
Chayre, yes.
Rosemary.
Yes, the brachas hadama. Toshema. So the Gemara brings a Braise or a Mishnah actually in Uktzin that says Hasheves, the dill, and the Braise there talks about dill when it comes to the halacha of truma and it comes to the halacha of tumah. Mishenosna tam b'gdeira. Once you took dill and you put it in a pot and it cooked in a pot and it gave taste into the pot, into the ingredients in the pot. Ein bo mishum truma. So now once you take out that dill from the pot, it's used because dill is only used for this purpose to give a taste. Exactly. So if you take the dill out of the pot, it's just like a piece of wood. It's not considered to be food anymore. So therefore, the halacha of truma does not apply to it. You don't eat it, and it's not truma anymore. The halacha that applies to food that become tamei don't apply to this dill anymore because it gave the taste into the pot, and if dill doesn't have any taste anymore, it's not a food anymore. So in the language of this Mishnah, you see clearly what does it say? What's the purpose of the dill? That it gives taste into the ingredients in the pot. So Shmami, no, you clearly see limituke taima of the law. That the purpose over here is to give taste to the food in the pot. So Shmami, no. So therefore we clearly see that if you're drinking water that the dill was cooked in and it has a certain sweet taste, whatever taste it has, the bracha would be adama, like in the other cases when you cook the vegetables in a pot. Now the Gemara returns to another halacha which was brought up before regarding the order of brachas. And the Gemara here will discuss specifically when you are making brachas on bread. So if you have a full piece of challah in front of you, a whole challah, or a whole loaf of bread, or a whole roll, or you have a broken challah, a broken roll, which one do you make a bracha on? Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi, so Rav Chia bar Ashi said, past snuma b'kaira. You have this dried up bread in a dish, which is you put it into a dish because you want to soak it in water and to soften it, and it's not a whole piece of challah, right? And so Taisus explains over here that what the Gemara is talking about is you have this piece of challah which is broken, and then you also have a whole piece of bread, a whole loaf of bread, or a whole roll in front of you as well. So which one do you make a bracha on? So Rav Chia bar Ashi said, "Mevorchen aleo ha'maitzi." You can make the bracha ha'maitzi on this broken piece of bread that you put into a dish in the water to soak. That's what you can make the bracha on. You don't have to make the bracha on the full roll. The Gemara says, "A pliga de Rav Chia." Rav Chia bar Ashi was arguing on Rav Chia. Rav Chia said that when you make a bracha, you should make it on a whole roll, on a whole challah. And how do you make the bracha? So he said as follows: Sarich shetichle bracha im hapas. When you make the bracha, when you begin making the bracha, you begin breaking off the challah, or you begin cutting it. And when you conclude the bracha, you also conclude breaking off or cutting the challah as you conclude the bracha. That's the way he said you make the bracha. Now let me just explain what is the logic behind this. The point there is, on one hand, you want to make a bracha on a whole challah, on a whole bread, but at the same time though, you don't want there to be an extra unnecessary break between the making of the bracha and the eating of it. So therefore, you begin the bracha, it's whole, but as soon as you begin the bracha, you're already cutting it, and when you complete the bracha, it's cut, and you could immediately put it into your mouth. That's Rav Chia's opinion. But the point is that Rav Chia holds that you have to make a bracha on the whole bread, not on the broken piece of bread. Maskef lo Rava disagrees to this. Rava says, Maishnot snuma deloi. So Rav Chia says, don't make the bracha on the broken bread. Why not? Mishum de chikalye bracha aprusika kalye. Because when you make the bracha, at the conclusion of your bracha is being made on a broken piece of bread. So ala pas nami. So the same thing over here is if you have a full bread and you begin cutting it at the beginning of the bracha, and when you complete the bracha, it's already broken. Ki gamra prusa gamra. The conclusion of your bracha, when you finish thanking the Eibishter, you're thanking the Eibishter on a bread that's already broken, and therefore it's the same thing. So the Rava basically says there's no point in cutting it while you're making the bracha and you conclude the bracha on a broken piece of bread. Right? So the point of here is there's an inyan if you're able to make a bracha on something that's more choshev, and so you make a bracha, thank the Eibishter on something that's more choshev. So Rava says if when you conclude the bracha, it's already broken, so then it's the same thing like making the bracha on a broken piece of bread. So what's the point? So therefore Rava argues, we turn to the next page, Lamed Testament days. Elo Amar Rava, Mevarech v'ach kach beitzeya. First you make the bracha, and then after you conclude the bracha, then you cut the bread. Nerdoi, so now the Gemara says, the people of the city of Nerdo, of the Rab Chia, they would follow Rab Chia's opinion, to cut the bread and complete the cutting it when they completed the bracha. Rabbanon, the rest of the Rabbanon, of the Rava, they followed Rava's opinion. Amar Ravina said, Amra li aim, my mother shared with me, Avuch ovid Rab Chia, your father would do like Rab Chia. The Amar Rab Chia, like Rab Chia said, Tzarech shetichle bracha mapas, that you conclude cutting the bread as you conclude making the bracha. V'Rabbanon, but the rest of the Rabbanon of the Rava, they followed Rava's opinion to make the bracha first and then cut the bread. The Hilchase and the final halacha is Kerava, we paskin like Rava, the Amma that says Mevarech v'achakach beitzeya, you make the bracha on the bread that's whole. So if you have two rolls, if you have a roll that's whole, a whole roll that's not whole, you make the bracha on the bread that's whole, and then v'achakach beitzeya, which by the way means two things. First, let me say it means if you're going to eat a bagel, for example, and you're planning on making a sandwich or something, so you should first make a bracha on the whole bagel, and then afterwards make your sandwich. Don't make the sandwich first and then wash. If you could, and thank the Eibishter on the whole bagel, which is more chashiv, first wash and make the bracha, and then later you'll make your sandwich. That's one thing you take from this Gemara. Another thing is, the Alter Rebbe says in Shulchan Aruch that we take a paskin like Rava, that you only cut it after you make the bracha, but you begin cutting it, you make a little, not only a line, but you actually begin cutting it a little bit when you start making the bracha. And the Alter Rebbe there says, how much should you cut it? Cut it only very little, enough, or that little that if you hold the piece of bread from that piece that you cut, it won't break off. Don't cut it too much that it should break off. Cut it just a little bit, and then you make the bracha. And the reason why you do that is, as I mentioned before, because if it's at all possible, you want it to be prepared for you to eat right when you make the bracha. So therefore you begin cutting it just a little bit, then you make the bracha, and then you complete cutting it. That's the halacha like Rava. With one exception, of course, which is Shabbos. On Shabbos, where we want to have lechem mishnah, so then the minig is that you just make a mark where you're going to cut the bread to help you be able to cut the bread quick as soon as you complete your bracha. But you don't actually begin cutting it like you're supposed to do in the middle of the week. Okay? That's the actual halacha. The Gemara continues on the same subject, and here the Gemara brings, similar to what we had before, a machlokes between Rav Huna and Rav Yochanan. Itmar hiviu lefneim psisin u'shleimin. If a person has in front of him a broken piece of bread and a whole bread, so what do you make the bracha on? Omer Rav Huna mevarach ala psisin u'paiter es hashleimin. You make the bracha on the broken piece of bread, and that will pater the full bread. So Rashi explains what he means to say. What Rav Huna means to say is two things. In a case that the broken piece of bread is smaller than the full challah, so then he's not telling you should make the bracha on the broken piece of bread. What he's telling you is you could. You could make it. You don't have to make it on the shleima. You could make it on the broken piece. In the case, though, what Rav Huna is saying is, in the case that the broken piece of bread is larger than a small challah, for example, so then he's saying you should make the bracha on the larger psisin, on the larger broken piece of bread, than on the small whole challah. That's Rav Huna's opinion. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees and says, shleima mitzvah min hamufcher. The mitzvah min hamufcher is to make the bracha on the whole bread, and that's more important. The shleimus is more than the size that there is of the broken piece of bread. And of course we paskin like Rabbi Yochanan, as you can see here. That's the halacha. Okay, but there's more details to this, as we'll see. Aval Prusa, now the Gemara says, however, what if the broken piece of bread is shalchitin, is from wheat? The shleima and the whole challah is minasairin, is made from barley. So chitin is more chashiv, because it comes first in the pasuk in the Shiva Saminim, right? Chita saira. So chitin is more chashiv. So divrei hakoil mevarach ala prusa shalchitin. Even Rabbi Yochanan would agree that you make the bracha on the broken piece of bread, which is from chitin, upaiter es hashleima, and that will pater from making the bracha on the shleima. Shal sa'irim, which is from barley. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba said, Ketanoi. It seems we can say that this argument of Rav Huna and Rav Yochanan was already argued about amongst Tanoim. Where were they arguing about this? Regarding the halacha of truma. What kind of truma should you give to a kayin? When you give kayin a truma, the truma, you have to give him chashiv. What's chashiv? What's the beautiful, the best? So over here the question becomes again, what is the most chashiv to give to the kayin? Term in batzel cotton. So the first opinion in the Mishnah is that you give a kayin a small, if you have a crop of onions, so you give him a small onion, sholem. which is whole onion, avaloi chatzi batzel gadol, rather than giving him a large onion that's sliced. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees and says, loiki, no, ela chatzi batzel gadol, you should better give him a large slice. You should give him a large slice of a big onion and not a small whole onion. My love, doesn't it seem? B'haka mifli, they're arguing about the exact same argument. The Mar Savar Choshev Adif, Rabbi Yehuda that says that you give a large onion even though it's sliced is because it's larger and it has more chshivas. Umar Savar, and Rabbi Meir's opinion is, or the Tanakama doesn't say Rabbi Meir, sorry, the Tanakama says, Shalem Adif, to give a full onion even though it's small, that's better. So this is the exact argument that Rav Hona and Rav Yechon are arguing about, the larger size or the Shalem, the full challah. So the Gemara says, no, that's not what they're arguing about at all. Heiche the ikke kayin, if the kayin is standing right there in front of you and you have to give this directly to the kayin, kula amalei pligi, they wouldn't be arguing at all the choshev adif, that you have to give the kayin what's more choshev. Right? So therefore you have to give the kayin not the shalem but the larger onion which is cut. Ki pligi, the only case that they're arguing about, whether you should give him the whole onion or give him a sliced onion, the leka kayin. If right now you're separating your truma but the kayin is not here. And then the question is, what is better? And the basis of the argument is a totally different point. It's not because it says in the Mishnah, and this is actually the Mishnah that comes right before the Mishnah that we just quoted. So that's how the Gemara knows that it's talking about the same subject. So what does it say in the Mishnah before? Kol makom sheyesh kayin. If the kayin is right here, taidem and ayafa. So you give him from the best. That's the mitzvah to give the kayin from the best. V'chol makom she'ein kayin. How about if the kayin is not present? So now he's not going to get it until a few days later or even a week later. So menamiskayim. You have to separate the truma of something that will be preserved for longer. They want the kain to get something that's preserved, not something that's going to be spoiled by the time it gets them. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees and says, Ein tayrem elam yafe. It comes to the mitzvah of truma, including when the kain is not present. The mitzvah always is to be tayrem, to separate from the best. There's two parts to the mitzvah. There's the mitzvah of giving it to the kain, and there's the mitzvah of separating it. When you're separating, that's a part of a mitzvah for itself. So when you're doing the mitzvah right then, there is an inyan right then also to that should be dafki from hayafa. What's going to happen later that it might not be miskayim? Make sure you find the kain before it gets spoiled. You should give it to him when it is miskayim. But right now when you're separating, that's a mitzvah, so therefore you have to give him from the best. So over here we see that you could say the same thing regarding the next Mishnah, which was discussing the onion. Which onion should you separate? Should you separate a big onion, a large onion, which is more choshev, or should you separate a full onion, which is going to be preserved longer? Onion that's cut open doesn't remain fresh as long. So that they're discussing a completely different argument. It's not relevant. It's not connected to our discussion regarding what takes the advantage. Is it choshev or shalei? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, "V'yirei shamayim, a person that's a God-fearing Jew, yaitzi yedei shneim, will be yaitze both Rav Huna and Rav Yechanan's opinion." Again, this is in a case where you have a small challah and a large slice, so you'll be yaitze both opinions. Umanu, who is Yirei Shamayim? Who do we find as an example for this? Mar Berei de Ravina, the son of Ravina. The Mar Berei de Ravina, maniach pruse b'toicha shleima. He took the slice of bread and he put it below or inside the whole challah. Ubeitzeya, and he cut from both of them. So he cut in a way that he was slicing both of them together to be yaitze both opinions, to cut side from the choshev and also from the shalom at the same time. Amalei, so he said to him, Amalei was said to him, Mai Shimcha, what is your name? Amalei Shalman, my name is Shalman. Amalei Shalem Ata, you are peace. Shlema Mishnascha, and your Torah is whole, complete. Shesamta Shalem ben Atalmidim. Your eitzah that you did, that you take the broken slide, the slice of bread, and you put it inside the whole challah, and you cut them together, makes Shalem between Rav Huna and Rav Yechanan. You could imagine sitting down by a meal, you have Rav Huna's students, Rav Yechanan's students, this guy screaming, no, make the bracha on this, he's screaming, make the bracha on that. And he made shalom that you can make the bracha on both of them together. Amar Rav Papa said, Hakel Maidim, everybody agrees that the Pesach, at the night of the Seder, on Pesach, when you make the bracha, Shemaniach Prusa B'teich Shleima Ubeitzeya, that you have to have a broken matzah and a whole matzah, and you put the broken matzah below the whole matzah, and that's how you make the bracha. My time, what's the reason to have a dafka, a broken matzah? Lechamayni ksiv. Because the pasuk says lechamayni, and the derech of an ani is to eat from broken pieces of bread. So therefore we have the broken piece of matzah. This thing that the Gemara here says about Pesach, Pesach, there's a huge machlokes in Rishonim exactly how this is done, and there's various different details that they argue about. First of all, you take a look in the Gemara here, what does it say? Prusa and shleima. It sounds like you have a matzah and a half. That's it. But of course, our minig is that we do 2.5 matzahs. It's not a matzah and a half because of what the Gemara is about to say. The next thing in the Gemara is Lechem Mishnah. If you have Lechem Mishnah, and in addition Lechem Mishnah, you have the middle matzah, which is a broken matzah. That's one argument. But other Rishonim disagree. The Rif and the Rambam disagree and say that no, it's a matzah and a half. And Ada Yom Hazeh, those that follow the shita of the Gra, only use a matzah and a half at the Leil HaSeder. Not 3 matzahs, but most of Klal Yisrael follows the opinion of majority of the Rishonim, which is 3 matzahs, don't we?
Drop one, like make one bracha. And then
so that's another. That's what this is going to get to. How many matzahs? That's one big argument. The other argument is going to get to what do you make the brachas on? Because there are 2 brachas that you make: Hamaitzi lechem and haaretz, and alachilas matzah. So over here in the lashon of the Gemara it says maniach prusa b'toich shleima or beitzeya. What is the bracha going on? Do you make both brachas on the prusa? Are you making both brachas on the shleima? Or maybe our minig actually is that the first bracha, hamaitzi, goes on the shleimas. That's why you hold all 3, so to have lechem mishnah, so the bracha of hamaitzi is on the shleimas. And then you drop the 3rd matzah, and then you make the bracha al achilas matzah without lechem mishnah, because the al achilas matzah is really going on the prusa. Because the al achilas matzah is the mitzvah of matzah, which is lechamayni. But other Rishonim disagree. Other Rishonim actually say it's the other way around. The hamaitzi goes on the prusa. Because the derech of an ani all year is that he makes the hamaitzi on the prusa, not the al achilas matzah on the prusa. And adarabah, the al achilas matzah goes on the shleima. That you can make lechem mishnah on, but the al achilas matzah goes on the prusa. So those are the various opinions in Rishonim that there are. But of course, we know what our minig is. We make the bracha on 3 matzahs or 2.5, and we make the hamaitzi on all 3. And you're supposed to stick your fingers in between to hold all 3 of them. And then you drop the matzah at the bottom, and you make the bracha al achilas matzah on the matzah and a half. Sagt die Gemara weiter, Rab Abba. Rab Abba said, since we're talking about the bracha during the week, that we follow Rabbi Yechanan's opinion that it's a mitzvah min hamufchar to make a bracha on the shleima. So now this also applies to Shabbos, and on Shabbos we have to make on 2 shleimas, like a Mishnah. So Rav Abba said, "B'Shabbos chayav liftzoi al shtei kikros." On Shabbos you make the bracha on two chalas, on 2 whole rolls or chalas. My time lechem mishnah, because regarding the man it says lechem mishnah, so zeicha to the man we make the bracha on Shabbos on 2 whole chalas. Now there's a big question amongst the Rishonim whether this applies to Yom Tov as well. There's a chiyuv of lechem mishnah on Yom Tov as well. Of course, our minig today is that it is, but it's not so pashut. And there's two ideas that are the basis to this suffix. So that's one shaila. When the man came down lechem mishnah, did it come down lechem mishnah only for Shabbos, or was the lechem mishnah for Yom Tov as well? The answer is it's a machlekes. It's not so pashut. Some say only for Shabbos there was lechem mishnah, but others say that even for Yom Tov there was also lechem mishnah. That's one shaila. The other shaila, which the Rebbe talks about this in a sicha, there's a sicha in Chelik Lamed Vav Parshas B'Shalach that the Rebbe speaks about this, and the Rebbe says from the hemshech of our Gemara it would seem that it would apply even to Yom Tov, because this idea that to be beitzeya on a shleima, the way the Gemara is describing it over here, and therefore on Shabbos there's an inyan to be beitzeya on 2 shleimas, so that would apply equally to Shabbos and Yom Tov. This Gemara, the exact same Gemara that we have over here, Omar Ababa, almost word for word, there are some differences, but almost word for word you have the same Gemara in Masechta Shabbos. So the Rebbe says in Masechta Shabbos, the Gemara is focusing on the halacha of the Sudas. On Shabbos there's a halacha, you have to eat 3 Sudas, which is no such a halacha for Yom Tov, but on Shabbos you have to have a Suda, and the requirement of Lechem Mishnah is as part of the Suda. That you should have a chosh of a Suda, not with 1 challah, but with 2 challahs. So that would not include Yom Tov. As far as what the Gemara explains in Masechta Shabbos, that it's a halacha regarding the Suda, on Shabbos where there is no these halachas regarding Sudas, so not necessarily the Yavdav Lachem Mishnah. On Yontif, sorry, I said Shabbos. Yontif, where there's no halachas of these Sudas, like Shabbos, so not necessarily do you need Lachem Mishnah. In our Gemara, though, the flow of the Sugya here is, it's discussing about Beitzeyam and Ashleiba, the bracha. It's not discussing the Suda. It's discussing the chshivas of the bread regarding the bracha. So regarding that, the Rebbe says, Shabbos and Yontiv are the same, and the Lachem Mishnah applies to Shabbos and Yontiv equally. That's the discussion here regarding this inyan. The Gemara continues. Amar Rav Ashi said, Chazina leile Rav Kahana, I saw the conduct of Rav Kahana, the Nakatarti u'Batzachada. He held both, when he made the bracha, he held both of them, and he cut from one of them, which is from the top one. He cut from the top challah, and he didn't cut from both of them. So the bracha was made on both of them, but he didn't actually cut from both of them. Which seems to imply that the main idea here is, like we said until here, the chshivas of the bracha. When you make the bracha, you're making the bracha of both of them. But you don't have to cut from both of them. You made the bracha on both of them, that's the chshivas of the bracha. Rab Zeira, however, have a batza akula shirusa. Rab Zeira, he would cut from both breads. He would, to be Yaitzel Lechem Mishnah, he would cut from both of them. Amalei Ravina said to Rav Ashi, and there's another detail there, the Kula Shirusa. I said one shot. Rashi says Kula Shirusa means, take a look, Prusa Gedaila. He cut, this is the way it's supposed to be done in Shabbos, he cut not from the edge of the bread, which is the way you're supposed to cut during the week. By the way, this is also a halach in Shulchan Aruch. People don't know this. But when you cut challah during the week, you're supposed to cut from the edge of the bread, which is baked, which is better baked in the middle of the bread, because people enjoy more the part of the challah that's crunchier and better baked, or bread that's better baked, and therefore when you cut and you thank Hashem, you take from the best part and you cut from the edge of the bread. That's how you're supposed to cut during the week.
What happens if you like the middle, which is softer?
This is what it says in Shulchan Aruch about. Okay, so that's chaviv. So that's a question of chaviv. Perhaps it's different, but usually you cut from the edge of the bread during the week. But on Shabbos, you cut a large slice. You're supposed to cut towards the middle of the bread to cut a large slice for the entire Suda. Okay, so you should have for the whole Suda of Shabbos, the Einik Shabbos for the whole Suda of Shabbos. That's what Kula Shirusa means. Amar Ravina Rav Ashi, so Ravina said to Rav Ashi, V'hakamischazi k'Rav Sanusa. Is this proper conduct? It looks like a Rav Sanusa. How would you translate Rav Sanusa for me? Okay, what's called in today's English a freser.
Yeah, freser, yeah.
Okay, so how would someone be allowed to cut challah in this way? Amalei, so he answered, no, it's not an issue. Kivin the chol yoime loika avid hachi. If every day of the week a person does not cut the challah this way or the bread this way, v'ha'idna ka'avid, and he's only doing it on Shabbos, the cover the Suda of Shabbos, so loim is chazik Rav Sanusa. It's clear that he's not a Rav Sanusa, he's doing it for the cover of the Suda of Shabbos. Rav Ami v'Rav Asi gehavam misrami luhu riftu dei ruva. When they had a bread that was being kept in their house that was being used for a Ruvi Chatzeris. So the halacha of a Ruvi Chatzeris is when you have a courtyard that is being used as a communal courtyard, that many houses are open to it, you're not allowed to carry in that courtyard. There's a Gzeir of Chazal that it looks like a Rosh Hashanah, you're not allowed to carry there unless they put food in one location where everybody is sharing that one location, so then it becomes like it all belongs to, it belongs to one place. The entire courtyard is connected just to one house, then they allowed you to carry there. So I guess they would sort of give turns every week, someone else to get to mitzvah, to put the challah in their house. And when Avam and Avasi, they got the challah in their house, they would eat it that Shabbos. They would eat it, they would use it for the Suda of Shabbos. Amri, they said, since one mitzvah was fulfilled with this, we fulfilled one mitzvah, we were Mekayim, the Takon of Chazal of Yeruvi Chatzeris, let's do another mitzvah and use it for the mitzvah of Suda Shabbos. So this is the halacha that's brought in Shulchan Aruch regarding Yeruvi Chatzeris, although today most people don't do Yeruvi Chatzeris more than once a year, which is also brought in Shulchan Aruch, that you do it from Erev Pesach to Erev Pesach, and you use something which could be preserved for the whole year, like a matzah. And we keep it. But Eruv Tavshilin, you make Erev Tavshilin from Shabbos to going into Yom Tov, so the Erev Tavshilin should be eaten. Should be eaten by the Suda. I mean, in Shulchan Aruch actually it's brought that the Erev Tavshilin should be used and be eaten by the Suda Shlishis, by the last Suda of Shabbos. Right? I meant to say before going in from Yom Tif to Shabbos. That's when you make Erev Tavshilin, so it should be eaten by Suda Shlishis. Although in Chabad, we don't really wash for Suda Shlishis, so you can eat it in the morning, Shabbos in the morning. Over here, B'negei Teruvah Chatzeris, it's also brought in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch that you should use it for Lecha Mishnah, either Friday night, because the Eruvah Tavshilin, there's an inyan to keep it for till the end of Shabbos, as late as possible. Mashenke in the Eruvah Chatzeris, as long as when Shabbos entered, that food was there for all the people in the courtyard, you can use it already Friday night for the Suda, for the Lecha Mishnah and eat it. Or you can use it Shabbos morning. You don't have to leave it until the end of Shabbos. But the point there is, if you do one mitzvah with something, you can use it then on Sunday, Monday and eat it then, do a second mitzvah with the same item and have another mitzvah. Maybe one is there after the whole year. You want to verbrennen it, but you don't. But after verbrennen.